Have you ever been judged? When asked this question, some of us may recall a scene from our childhood where we were laughingly told that we were too young or too small or the wrong gender to do something that we wanted to do. Others may recall a job interview that we went to where we could sense that the interviewer had already ruled us out the moment we walked into the door. Or perhaps we may recall a time when we were walking down a street when a group of strangers shouted epithets and made obscene gestures at us as they drove by. For some of us, this question may bring back painful memories. The next question is, have you ever judged someone? Those of us who are honest would have to admit that we have. We may have been the adult who laughingly told a child that she was too young or too small or the wrong gender to do something that she wanted to do. We may have been the interviewer who rejected a job candidate because we didn't like the way he dressed. Or we may have, in our youthful foolishness, hurled epithets and objects at a stranger because we and our friends thought it was funny. There are two sides to every judgmentalism story. The fact is, we are all judgmental to some degree, whether we realize it or not. Why do humans judge others? How can we stop doing it? Or is it even possible or even desirable to? Before tackling these questions, let's define what judgmentalism is. It comes from the word judgment, which has several meanings, of which we are concerned with two. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, one definition is the process of forming an opinion or evaluation by discerning and comparing, which sounds like it could be a good thing. Another is a tendency to judge people too quickly and harshly. When we say someone is judgmental, it is usually used in the second, negative sense. It means to form opinions about something or someone or some situation based on appearance without considering the facts. Using an old expression, it is to judge a book by its cover. Let us think for a moment how the human brain works. We receive input through our five senses and send it to the brain. The brain, using its massive dictionary of information accumulated throughout a lifetime, tries to identify that information. For example, it sees a red round object with a stem on top. It concludes from past experience that the object is an apple. Then the brain tells us whether the object is good, bad, or neutral. This is all done in a fraction of a second. For some people, an apple may bring back happy childhood memories of picking apples from their backyard tree or grandma baking apple pie for Christmas. For them, an apple would be something positive. For someone else, it may bring back memories of working long, hard hours in an apple orchard or getting violently ill after eating a bad apple. For them, an apple may be something negative. That is judging. Judging has been useful in human evolution. Our ancestors needed to know which animals to stay away from or which plants they should or should not eat, for example. Their survival depended on it. By grouping things that look alike or have similar characteristics, it saves us from having to evaluate each one individually. This useful ability, unfortunately, was the start of judgmentalism in a negative sense as we know it today. There are two parts to the process of judging: identification and categorization. There is nothing wrong with identifying a black person versus a white person, a man versus a woman, a Christian versus a Muslim, or a thin person versus an overweight person. The problem is when we attach a good or bad label to that group as a whole. Let's take a look at the original anti-discrimination clause introduced in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title VII prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. It sounds like a good start, covering the major groups that felt they were discriminated against at the time. Next, let's take a look at a current equal opportunity statement from a university. It is long, so you can read it on your own. It is a good indication of how our idea of discrimination as a society has evolved over the past half a century. Let us think about this statement. Does it sound like progress? Does it sound like an improvement to the first statement? On the surface it may, in that it covers a wider range of people who feel that they have been discriminated against. But do we see anything wrong with it? Imagine someone with a big nose coming forward and saying, "What about me? I also feel discriminated against because of a facial feature. I want to be recognized too." Or it could be someone with a foreign accent, or who wears a headscarf, or who has tattoos, pointing out that they also have been discriminated against, so they should be added as a protected group. If the university were to accommodate every group that feels discriminated against, their statement could end up 10 times longer by the end of the century. You can easily see that naming different groups is not a solution. If an organization wanted to publicly declare that they do not discriminate, why not simply state, "We do not discriminate against anyone"? The truth is, we all have ingrained biases depending on our individual life story. If you were to put 100 strangers in a room and allow them to mingle freely, they will have a tendency to congregate with people whom they may have something in common with, whether they are from the same country, are of the same race, dress similarly, or are from the same age group. It is not that they are avoiding the others. They just feel more comfortable with persons who look and act more like themselves. There is nothing wrong with relating to a certain group of people. It becomes judgmentalism when we start believing that our group is better than others, or when we assume someone is one way or another because of which box we place them in. Albert Einstein once said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." If you have been following the news, you can see that we are trying to solve violence with violence, hatred with hatred, and injustice with injustice. Humanity is stuck in a downward spiral, and if we continue on this path, there will be no one left to hate. We need to get off the eternal seesaw of blaming one another. We must transcend the illusion of who is right and who is wrong and work together to make this planet a better place for everyone. White people are not the cause of racism. Men are not the cause of sexism. Police officers are not the cause of violence. To say so would be judging. We must be careful in our desire to eradicate judgmentalism that we do not become judgmental ourselves. No amount of fighting will resolve these issues. As Einstein would have said, we are using the same thinking that we used to create the problem in the first place. Racism, sexism, police brutality, homophobia, religious persecution, nationalism, as well as many other forms of intolerance are all effects of judgmentalism and not the cause. Treating the effect of a problem may make us feel good, but it does nothing to solve the problem. We must address the cause. So what is the cause of judgmentalism? It is ignorance, and the cure to ignorance is education. When we think of education, it is easy to bring our grievances into the picture. Some of us immediately think in terms of punishing those who do wrong. When we are wronged, it is natural to want to seek revenge or to teach the other guy a lesson. This has resulted in an endless cycle of one group using violence against another, regardless of whether the individuals they are attacking actually committed the offense or just looks like someone who may have. This is how innocent victims are created. Once at an interfaith conference, a Jewish rabbi and Muslim imam began to argue about which religion was to blame for the ongoing conflict between the two. Each brought up an incident where their people were unjustly attacked, and the other pointed out that the attack was justified because it was in revenge for an act of violence committed by the other. Before the moderator finally put a stop to it, they went back hundreds of years in history. Let us learn from the painful lessons of our predecessors. Punishment is not education. Punishment is not education. The person who is punished will certainly not appreciate the lesson. He will not learn to love and respect those who punished him. If anything, it will only make him more hateful and resentful. So how can we transcend this endless cycle of judging and being judged? The first step is to realize just how judgmental we really are. Before we put people in a box out of habit, we can make a conscious effort to see them as a human being, with their own set of beliefs, struggles, and shortcomings. Instead of looking for someone to blame when something goes wrong, we can focus on finding a solution. We can start a friendly conversation with a stranger from another country, religion, race, or social group who we may not normally have an opportunity to associate with. Instead of getting our children involved in competitive sports where the goal is to beat others, we can involve them in charitable activities where the goal is to serve others. And instead of teaching through criticizing or punishing, we can teach by setting an example. There's a story about a Zen master. He had many students coming in and out of his temple, as well as those who lived there with him. One day, one of the younger, newer students was caught stealing. The students who caught him reported him to Master and asked that he expel that student immediately. Master listened to their complaint, but did not expel the culprit. A while later, the same student was caught stealing again. By then, the whole temple had heard about the stealing incident, and also of the fact that Master did nothing when told about it the first time. The students got together and angrily dragged the young student in front of Master. "Master, here is the thief. Please expel him immediately. If you don't, then we are all leaving." Master calmly replied, "You are all wise enough to know right from wrong. You will do fine, even if you decide to leave me and go elsewhere. But this poor brother, he does not know right from wrong. Who will teach him if I do not?" Upon hearing that, the student who had stolen broke down in a torrent of tears. He apologized to everyone and vowed to never steal again. He kept that vow for the rest of his life. Imagine what would have happened to that young thief if Master had thrown him out that day. Now let's go back to the anti-discrimination statement that we discussed earlier. We do not discriminate against anyone. While it is an improvement to the lengthy statement of the university, we can go one step further. We need to strive to create a society in which such a statement is no longer necessary. We need to realize that we are this one big family that we call the Earth, which includes humans as well as the plants, the animals, insects, minerals, and so forth. We are interdependent. And because we are interdependent, we need to realize that our well-being depends on the well-being of others, whatever form they may come in. Instead of criticizing and blaming each other, or trying to outdo each other with our righteousness, we need to learn to love and respect each other and try to live together in peace. We can do better, all of us. Namaste.